I'm a clinical nutritionist. I practice in Toronto. I see people one-on-one. I also teach at a couple schools, the Institute of Holistic Nutrition and the Ontario College of Homeopathic Medicine. And I run all sorts of workshops and do lectures like this. I also formulate, and I've written a couple systems for people to basically take control of their health. And I'm passionate about health. I love it. I love talking about it. I love helping people live to their fullest, because as Oliver mentioned, if we don't have our health, we have nothing. And I have people like this coming into my office every day, which have reached their wit's end, and they're ready to make a change. So hopefully I can arm you with some really valuable information where you can make some changes today, because knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is really power. So let's get right into it. And the title of the talk today was How Diet and Lifestyle Shape Your Genetic Health. Right? Our genes are very important for shaping our health. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what a gene is, what epigenetics is. How many of you have ever heard the term epigenetics? Yeah, a few? Okay, you'll all be experts after this, and you can use that with your friends and family to impress them. What affects our genes, and how to influence the gene, most importantly. Okay? Has anyone ever said or been told it's in the genes, you can't do anything about it, it's genetic? Absolutely. We've all heard it, we might have said it, and it's true a little bit, but it's not the whole story. There are so many different things that can influence the way our gene is expressed. So just to give you a little idea of what the gene is, okay? We're going to take this all the way back to grade 10 biology, if you can remember that far back. And we have about 10 trillion cells making up our body. Each one of those cells has a nucleus, and inside that nucleus there's this library of information called the chromosome. And that's made up of genes. And they're all in different orders for different people. So that gene tells our body what to do. And we have an old paradigm. And the old paradigm says, and a lot of the textbooks that are actually still out there say, that our gene controls our health. It tells our body what it's supposed to do. And again, that's part of the equation. But the other part of the equation is that we can actually influence the gene from the outside through diet and lifestyle and environmental factors. And there's actually this crosstalk. There's this conversation that's going on between the gene and the person and what's happening on the outside of the gene. So we've got a genotype, which we might define by the color of our hair, by how tall we might be able to grow, by the color of our skin, the color of our eyes, what our potential is. That's our genotype. And that's a whole library of books we could think about. But our phenotype is a completely different story. That's how our gene is expressed. So I might be able to grow 5'9", but if I'm malnourished my whole life, I might only grow 5'7". Does that make sense? That's my phenotype, the 5'7". But if I have the best food, and I'm well nourished, and I stay away from toxins, and I relax, and I do stress relief, well, I'll grow to 5'9". And now I'm fully expressing my gene to the best of its ability. So a couple examples, just to illustrate the point. Now, we've all seen butterflies, right? What do they start out as? Caterpillars. The genes of the caterpillar and the genes of the butterfly are the exact same. They're just expressed completely differently. The caterpillar closes itself, it completely dissolves, and then regrows to become a beautiful butterfly. Same genes, different expression. Another example is bees. Okay, so we've got the worker bees and we've got the queen bee. And do you know what the only difference is between the worker bee and the queen bee in terms of what they eat? Royal jelly. And they have the exact same genes. Actually, the queen bee is chosen at birth, and the queen bee's job is to get it on with all the worker bees and make lots of babies. You need good food for that. 2,000 eggs per day at the height of its fertility. Now that's a lot of work. So it needs the best food possible, and it grows 3 times the size as the workers. And the workers live maybe about 3 months. The queen bee, 4 to 5 years. that's genetics, that's epigenetics. So epigenetics is how our environment shapes our structure and function. We have a lot of control here. And there was a great article that came out in Time magazine called Why Your DNA Isn't Your Destiny. You can look this up. It's a great article telling us that our genes are really not in charge of our destiny, in charge of our health. Okay? And then there was actually an article that came out a little bit after entitled How the First 9 Months Shape the Rest of Your Life. So in fact, we can actually influence our genes before we're born. That's astounding. This is amazing information. Now, we get half of our genes from our mother and half of our genes from our father. And that makes a whole us, right? Each one of you. Now, what's interesting is even taking that a step further is half of your genes are alive when your mother is in her 3rd trimester in gestation. All of her eggs are made in her 3rd trimester. And then she's born, and that egg finds the partner at some point, and then your father fertilizes the egg, and then now you have all the genes. So you were actually existing way before your mother was even born. And that can influence the gene as well. So it goes far beyond what we even know here. And the gene takes 10,000 years to change 0.01%. That's a long time. But how much have we changed our diet and lifestyle in the past 100 years? It's astounding. So we thought that, you know, we wanted to map the gene. We wanted to figure out how many genes the human had. This was a big project. We spent lots of money. Everyone was so excited. We're going to find out the cause of every disease. What did we find out? We found out we have about 25,000 genes. What does that mean? Well, anyone have an idea of how many genes a piece of rice has? 100,000. So there's a lot more to it than that, right? There's a lot more to the gene than that. So we realized that there's a lot more to expressing the genes than just the amount of genes we have. And there's a great researcher by the name of Weston A. Price who was wondering, this was in the 1930s, he was a dentist. And he kept on looking in people's mouths, and everyone had cavities and needed root canals and had all these dental problems going on. And he wondered if this was something that was consistent all across the world. So he stopped being a dentist and he started to be a researcher, and he went and traveled the world. And at this time, in the 1930s, there had been many people who had not been touched by Western culture and Western diet. So he went around, and what he discovered was that basically, in most of his patients, they had, a mouthful of cavities, at least 3 or 4 cavities. And with the people that he looked at, it took 3 to 4 mouths to find 1 cavity. So he basically concluded in his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, a fantastic book all about his studies, that the Western diet is the cause for degenerative disease. Refined foods, no stress relief. And he looked at these 2 boys, and in this one culture, they actually had, some people was still eating the indigenous diet, and some people were eating the Western diet. And he saw these 2 boys, and his father said how difficult it was for the boy who was on the Western diet to wake up in the morning and go to work. And they were twins. Same genes, right? Completely different outcome in their life. They've done studies on rats. They've done studies where they take one rat and they give it a certain diet, and they take another rat and they eliminate certain nutrients, specifically 3 B vitamins, B12, B6, and folic acid. And the one who doesn't get the nutrients becomes obese. So we know that food and nutrients can affect our genes. They've looked at people who use drugs, and they see that it can affect their genes, and you can see they age much quicker. There's pictures where you can see this effect. There have been lots of studies on pharmaceuticals, properly prescribed drugs, and how they affect the genes that way. And what they've discovered is that epigenetic results can happen way after the drug has been discontinued. And what they concluded in this study was that all pharmacology has to be reevaluated, because what we think is that when someone stops taking a drug, the effect is over. But really, it could just be the beginning. And there's actually a class action lawsuit going on with Accutane, a drug for acne, often used in teenagers and children, who get inflammatory bowel disease 10 to 15 years after they've discontinued the drug. So it affects multiple genes. Now, enough of the bad news. Let's talk about some of the good news. We can reverse disease. So there's a study carried out on this gentleman with prostate cancer. And what they did was they did a diet and lifestyle intervention. And he had a PSA of about 6.4 before the intervention. Above 4 is dangerous. It means that there might be some cancer there. And about 3 months after they began the intervention, it was already at a 4. And the tumor had shrunk. And in the slide I have a picture of it for you, and I'll send that to you if you'd like. It affected 31 genes, and they actually looked at these specific genes and saw that they had changed in their expression. So it wasn't expressing cancer anymore, it's expressing health. So we can reverse these types of things. Henry David Thoreau said, "Nature is doing her best each moment to make us well. She exists for no other end. Do not resist with the least inclination to be well. We should not be sick. The body wants to heal. The body wants to do well." It's just like if you have a sliver. You don't just put a Band-Aid over the sliver, right? What do you do first? You take out the sliver. You take out the sliver and then the healing begins. So sometimes we just have to find what that sliver is. Maybe it's a deficiency, maybe it's a toxin, maybe it's just stress. We have to relax a little bit more. And we have all this information about epigenetics. We have all this information about the possibility of changing our genes, but we still have the common thought that it's all in the genes. Okay? So we have to realize that we can affect our health, we can change our health. And there's a great book written called The Soil and Health, because we have to figure out where to begin. Where do we begin with all this? How do we start affecting our gene? How do we start changing it and manipulating it and getting it to express the best that we can be? And this book, The Soil and Our Health, was written by Sir Albert Howard. And he said, we must treat the whole problem in health and soil, plant, animal, and man as one great subject. So we have to begin from the ground up, from our soil, where our nutrients come from. And our nutrients have been depleted over the years. They come from far. Our soils, we use pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and larvicides and all those different sides. Has anyone ever heard of Roundup? Made by a company called Monsanto? They basically genetically modify these crops like corn so they can handle as much pesticide as is given to them without dying, but it kills everything else. So they just spray as much of the stuff on as they can. And then more pesticides end up in your food. And so our food isn't like it used to be. If we were still eating the exact same indigenous diet as we ate 100 years ago, we probably wouldn't be getting the nutrients we needed. Because our food has changed. Our food has changed substantially. So, when in doubt, when you're in that grocery store and you're like, oh, I remember Josh said something about epigenetics and our food's important and I don't really know what to get, I'm all confused. Just think, what would great-grandma do? Right? If there's an ingredient on that product that your great-grandma wouldn't recognize, don't eat it. Wise woman. So, how have things changed? Well, back then, we ate whole foods. We ate indigenous foods. We ate from the land. We ate nuts and seeds. We ate fruits and vegetables. We had wild game. We had fish. And now we have McDonald's. Has anyone ever heard of this? Treated white grains, white bread, Wonder Bread, that nice fluffy stuff that you can kind of bounce off of. Right? You have those nice happy kids in the commercials taking that big bite out of it. It looks so delicious. Well, that wheat has changed substantially. That wheat isn't like it used to be. It's been hybridized and changed and morphed, so it has more and more gluten. And gluten's this really sticky, fluffy, delicious substance that's in all these breads. So we want more and more of it, and that's how we bred our crops. But now people are actually having all sorts of immune reactions to it. There's actually a disease called celiac disease. A disease actually tied to the food we eat, to the thing that actually sustains us and keeps us living and has let us be here today from generation to generation. It's unbelievable. And of course there's non-celiac gluten sensitivity too, which is not quite celiac, but a whole other sensitivity level, which I'm not going to get into today. East Africans. There's a great doctor by the name of Dr. Burkett. He was a British surgeon, and he studied East Africans. And what he found was, on average, they had 100 grams of fiber per day. And their transit time was about 18 to 24 hours. Transit time is the amount of time it takes for food to get from our mouth to the toilet. So, recommendations in Canada is about 35 grams. And on average, people eat about 25 grams, and their transit time is about 72 hours. How many times do you guys take out the garbage per week? Once a week? Yeah? What happens if you forget, and then you leave it in the garage or wherever, and it sits there for 2 weeks? And then you maybe forget again, and it sits there for 3 weeks? It's not a good situation. Everyone knows when the garbage strike happens, it's not pretty. That's what happens in your gut when you're not going to the bathroom 1 to 3 times a day. Right? So that creates all sorts of disease as well. And that affects our gene. We're all talking about things that affect the gene here. Now, back then, there wasn't many toxins. In fact, the only toxins that were really in existence back then were the ones that we created in our body. You create some toxins, which is fine, but you detoxify them and you clear them out. You eliminate them if you're taking out that garbage, right? If you're sweating, if you're breathing. These are all of our channels of elimination. Now what we have is we have toxins from all sorts of places. We have factories dumping toxins into our water streams. It's going into the air. We have people using environmental toxins. And we have toxins going on our food. We have toxins going on our skin. Whatever you put on your skin, you absorb. And we don't even realize that. So we have a whole variety of toxins that are influencing our genes. Now, how many people have an iPhone? Please take it out for a moment. This is the point where you don't want to put it away and turn your that's up. This is the point where you want to take it out. And I'll talk about what I'm doing. So for those of you who don't have an iPhone, you'll know exactly what we're going through. So, I want you to go to the home page, you know, where you have all your icons, and find settings. Click on settings. Okay. Everyone with me? Who has an iPhone? Okay. Then you want to go down a little bit, about halfway to General. Okay? And then you want to click right at the top on About. And then you want to go all the way to the bottom of that page to Legal. And then all the way to the bottom of that page, you want to click on something called RF exposure. That's called radio frequency exposure. And then in the third paragraph, it says the following. To reduce exposure to RF energy, use a hands-free option, such as a built-in speakerphone, the supplied headphones, or other similar accessories. Carry iPhone at least 10 millimeters away from your body to ensure exposure levels that remain at or below the as-tested levels. The warning's right in the phone. That's affecting our genes. We're finding people with cancer. A lot of people keep their phone, women, in their bra. It's like the cool thing to do, especially with kids. We're finding out that people have tumors right under the phone. And not the typical tumors that you get in the breast, very unusual tumors with multiple spots. So we have all these things affecting our genes. The top killers in the world are high blood pressure, tobacco, high blood sugar, physical inactivity, overweight, obesity, high cholesterol, all things we can modify through diet and lifestyle. So, what can we do to actually modify this? Well, we're adaptable. Darwin said that it's not a matter of the strongest species, because we're definitely not the strongest, or even the smartest, but it's about adapting to our environment. We have Inuit living way up in the north. We have, Africans living all around the equator, right, close to the equator, and thriving. So there was a wonderful study in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, and it talked about the use of vitamins for chronic disease and prevention in adults. And said that some groups are at higher risk for vitamin and mineral deficiencies. We're all at really high risk here for vitamin D deficiency, right? Unless we were doing this outside, that'd be a different story. Physicians may be unaware of this, they also concluded, and that inadequate intake of several of these vitamins are linked to chronic disease. So sometimes we need some extra support. And I'd like to touch on a few products. Aloe vera, fantastic product. Use it with many of my clients. It's extremely soothing to the digestive tract, promotes healing, it promotes growth, and it actually activates your immune system. We've had these plants in our home for years, but we never eat them. Start eating your plants. Try it out. We've also got garlic. Anyone ever heard of this obscure, unusual herb? No one's heard of garlic? Okay, yeah. It's available everywhere, but yes, garlic is one of the most powerful medicines on the planet. It's a natural antibiotic. Feel a cold coming on? Eat some garlic. It's got anti-clotting activity, wonderful for the cardiovascular system. It's a natural ACE inhibitor. This is a drug that they use for high blood pressure and heart issues. It's a powerhouse. And then we have bee products are one of my favorites. I got to work with a beekeeper for a while. And he told me all about bees. I used to be scared of bees. Who's scared of bees? Heard of bees? Oh, you don't have to tell me. But deep inside, oh, there's that bee. It's going to sting me. We have bad memories from childhood. But they make all sorts of medicine for us. Honey. Honey is the only food on the planet that has an indefinite shelf life. They found it from pyramids and Egyptian tombs from way back when. Great antimicrobial, really soothing to the throat if you have a cough. And it's just a powerhouse. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. Okay, it's actually bee vomit, in case you didn't know that. They eat the nectar, they mix it with their enzymes, and then they spit it back up, and that's what honey is. Who knew vomit tasted so good? And then they've actually put honey against cough syrup, and honey has beat it out every single time in studies. Amazing. We also have things like bee pollen, one of the most complete foods on the planet. They store it on their little back legs, and then they bring it to the hive, and that's their source of protein. We have something called propolis, which they collect from plants. They don't make it, they collect it. And propolis is one of the strongest antimicrobials. They used to preserve mummies in propolis. And bees use it because sometimes little mice go into their hive in the winter because they're hungry. Then they sting it to death so it doesn't eat their food. And then they have to preserve it somehow so it doesn't infect the whole hive. And that's what they use propolis for. And then, of course, I talked about royal jelly, the food for the queen. So we also have fats. Fats are really useful. The good fats. What happened to our fats? Fat-free this, fat-free that. We're scared of fats. We've got fat phobia. Your brain is 60% fat. You've all got fat brains. It's good news. And those fats are made up of whatever fats you consume. So if I'm consuming McDonald's fats, I'm going to have a McDonald's brain. If I consume fish oils, I'm going to be one smart cookie. Because those are the best fats for the nervous system. One of them is called DHA, and DHA makes up 13% of your brain. Comes from fish. Excuse me. So, to wrap up here, because I know I'm running out of time, all of these foods, all of these nutrients, supplements, lifestyle, stress relief, influence our gene. And we don't have to be a victim of our gene. We can have a role to play. We can make it be expressed to the best of its ability by feeding it exactly what it wants. So I hope you learned one or two things today. And knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is real power. So take some of this and use it right away. Thank you so much.